So in the last video, we dealt with the long run aggregate supply. Here, we're going to change the time frame a little bit, and we're going to move to the short run aggregate supply curve. We're going to see that we have to have two different aggregate supply curves because firms have different abilities to produce in the long run than in the short run, and this can have serious consequences for macroeconomics. Our aggregate supply tells us our willingness and ability of producers to supply output. However, that willingness and ability of producers to supply depends on the time frame considered. The short-run willingness to produce can differ drastically from the long-run willingness to produce. So remember that in the short run, economies' prices have yet to adjust and cost components have not yet adapted to market conditions. So our short-run aggregate supply curve is going to be upward sloping. The short-run aggregate supply is the various quantities of goods and services that domestic firms will supply in response to changing demand conditions. In the short run, we have a different response of firms than we do in the long run. The response of firms can be shown by this upward sloping relation when graphed with a vertical axis of a price level and a horizontal axis of how much production we actually have. Firms can respond to higher demand. When demand moves out, this causes a higher price level, and it also creates an expansion of output from firms. Higher price levels, say from that higher level of demand, improve a firm's profit margins in the short run because the cost components of supplying the goods are temporarily fixed. So there is more demands for the goods, and yet the cost of producing them is stuck at a consistent amount. And so firms will love this situation and will try to produce more goods, and they will kind of work overtime to supply more goods and services in the short run. So as the price level goes up, so too does the output in the short run. So we have an upward sloping short run aggregate supply curve. All right, guys, so that was the short run aggregate supply curve. We saw that the short run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping in our aggregate supply aggregate demand model. To move on to our last curve in the aggregate supply aggregate demand model, we're going to now move to the aggregate demand curve. So click on the video right over here and you'll continue on in this video lecture series.